With that, we are going to get ready for a beautiful, 101st Pearl of Wisdom. So here we go. And Mynoo, thank you for bringing this forth.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, let's begin. Right. 101st Pearl of Wisdom, indeed. My goodness. When we began, it felt like, okay, this is going to carry on for some time. And we are nearly here. Resilience. And I like the 7 boosters of resilience. And like Catherine, you pointed out earlier on, it basically means that resilience already exists. It's just a matter of boosting it using these different boosters that we are going to learn about. And that in itself is very comforting to know that resilience already exists. So first of all, let's just really get to know what resilience actually is and what it means. And in what we are about to do today, you get to learn about these boosters. And once you learn about them, you get to create your own strategy for applying them. And as you apply these boosters, it literally opens the doorways to manifestation with Joy Ease Grace Omnipresent, JEGO as we call it. So resilience itself, what does it mean? It means the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficult situations. Like a resilient, it's a form of toughness, if you like. And that's like one aspect of resilience. It also is the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape. So it's got that elasticity. It also is sometimes described as a process and an outcome of successfully adapting to a difficult or a challenging life experience. And resilience often refers to mental, emotional, behavioral flexibility, adjustment to external or internal demands. So it's pretty cool to know that we have an innate capacity to spring right back up. It's up to us, and no huge process required to do that. And it also highlights this emotional and mental flexibility that is innate to us by the virtue of us being humans. So let's look at how can we boost these? What it also means is, you've heard me talk about this many times before, that there's always a cycle that we go through. Begins with information, begins with data. And as that data is received and we start to process it, it starts to become information. And as we implement it, that information starts to become knowledge. And the more we start implementing it in a variety of ways, it starts to become wisdom. And then you start implementing it, it starts to become like second nature to us. It lands in a space of knowing. So even understanding that you have this infinite capacity of mental, emotional flexibility that is there, which enables you to adjust to external and internal demands, and you can spring right back. The elasticity that is there in your being, that in itself gives us the ability to take some risks. And this capacity is there within us to enable us to be able to stand in our strength, own our strength, and be able to exercise and express our choice. Because after all, we are the choice in our matter, always. And then to know that we actually have boosters, and that we have the freedom to work with these boosters. That's a very powerful understanding to operate from. So you can imagine, even understanding just this, even if you did nothing with any of the boosters, that in itself will boost your ability to show up with confidence. It gets you to stand tall, reclaiming your spine. So booster, what's a booster? A booster is an enthusiastic supporter. It's often an auxiliary device mechanically that increases force or power or pressure or effectiveness. So here we have an internal auxiliary device that is there within us. And all that you require to activate that, to utilize the device, is the mental choice that you make. So let's look at the first booster. What is the first booster? The first booster is radiancy. Radiancy is a quality. It's a quality of really being bright and sending out rays of light. And that you're happy to send them out. You're not afraid to show that happiness. And it shows in your face. So radiancy is a booster. Now look at it. It's about sending out rays of light. We are all star beings. And what is the difference between a star and a planet? And the way it is described to us in a simplistic way is that stars have their own light. We have our own inner light. We have it. Most of us have heard it. We may not have consciously presenced it, but it does exist. So radiancy, the first booster, is just simply connecting to who we truly are. The star being who's here, present, with our own inner light. And then to start sharing that. The thing about light is, as I was explaining to a few people yesterday, that the exciting thing about light is it really busts this thing about that, whenever there's a group of people, the lowest common denominator pulls everything towards it. So what if there's a low vibe, that it pulls everything with it? It's like you have a rotten apple and it can make the whole package go rotten. As this is something that's talked about. It works very differently when it comes to light. It's not at all like that. And we all know it. We all have experienced it. In pitch darkness, a tiny sliver of light means it's not dark anymore. So similarly, you or me, by the virtue of being human, when we show up with our inner light. And it's not dark anymore. So we have to work really hard to retain that low vibe, retain that darkness, by allowing our thoughts to go on a spin. And then the thoughts multiply, multiply, multiply. The good news is you can interrupt those thoughts simply by clicking your finger, like literally like this. And that's that tiny little speck of light, and it's not dark anymore. Because the moment you interrupt a pattern where your thoughts are taking you astray, you come straight into your light. Now take action. The moment you take an action, the bandwagon started rolling. And light automatically regenerates. Now, many of you who've read my B book might have read stories of a very strange hobby that I inculcated and cultivated when I was young. And it was the hobby of going exploring in underground passages underneath old palaces, old forts, old temples in India. And as a young girl, that was something that I was totally fascinated by. A pretty dangerous thing to do, actually. However, I just loved it. And here's the thing, when you go exploring like that, the moment you find an underground passage, you literally go in, and then you have to keep walking forward. So initially, we would, me and a cousin of mine, we would steal a tiny little torchlight from home. They weren't that tiny in those days. They were actually, like this thick, with those big batteries in them. So we would steal those, and we would turn those on, and we would keep moving forward. And when you are in an underground passage, there's no turning back. Once you're in it, you just have to keep moving forward with the trust that you will see light at the end of this tunnel. And literally, the experience was exactly as I'm describing. The moment there was a slight opening, the moment we saw that tiny little ray of light, we would run for it. Not because we were scared, but because we were excited. We would just run for it, and then we would come out into the light. Now, we did this a few times, and we were actually in a particular part of India that had a huge fort, ancient fort, and we would go exploring there. And then the torch was required at home for some reason, and they realized it was missing. And it wasn't a tiny little thing that we could just shove into our pocket. So when we come home, they discover that my cousin has got it. He gets told off for it. He would often get punished for doing naughty things, but he tells me now that he was always following my leadership and sometimes misinterpreted it. And it turned out to be quite naughty, but he would take the brunt of it. So anyway, the torch got put in the lock and key. So we still wanted to go exploring, but now we did not have a torch. I was 11, he was 9 years old. So off we go to the next day. It was like, we're going to go. But by this time, this is a very large fort on top of a hill. So and when something like this exists on top of the hill, the underground passage have all sorts of, like it's literally like a road network, except it's of underground tunnels. And some of them were escape routes. Some of them were a whole different communities would sometimes live in there, so that they would protect those underground tunnels just in case the fort was attacked. So anyhow, we go this time, and now we don't have the torch. And so what we did was we bought these, they're called beedies. They are like rolled tobacco leaf that the very poor people who can't afford cigarettes would buy them. Now, we were really tiny. We'd never, ever done anything like this before. But somehow we believed that the sliver of light was going to give us enough light to be able to move forward. Even that was a dangerous thing to do, because when you do go underground, there are all sorts of growths that are there. And sometimes the root system of trees, they are quite dry, and you really don't want to expose any of that to fire. However, we were kids, invincible. So in we go. And we light this thing, and we didn't know that it would smoke it in. Thank God for that. We were just blowing it to get that light. And it is exactly like I'm saying, that tiny little sliver of light just gave us enough to know what the next step was going to be, what the next step was going to be, what the next step was going to be. And we had the most amazing adventure. Then that became our thing. We didn't need the torch. We could just do with this little thing. Now, my reason for sharing that, it's an odd sort of story, but it really has anchored within me. It took me into a space of knowing about light. The moment there is even a tiny little sliver of light, a whiff of light, it's not dark anymore. Fast forward, applying it to resilience, and really applying it as a radiancy, as a booster. We are radiant. We just are radiant. It's about us owning our radiancy. And we have a very powerful example of whatever the world has been through and whatever each one of us went through during the recent Corona times. Yes, we started this journey of 108 Pearls of Wisdom during those times. And we had our ups and downs. And it was full of uncertainty. And it wasn't that we weren't acknowledged. You couldn't not acknowledge the ups and downs that were taking place. And what kept us moving forward, what got us to where we are today, is that reconnection to us as the radiant ones. The exciting thing is that this radiancy exists in every living being, every living thing. There was a point where, I was visiting Rajasthan, which, Catherine, I know you've spent some very special times there, and stayed with a king. And I was there with Dr. Ali, a dear friend, and quite a prolific integrated health practitioner. And the king would send his drummers out. And Dr. Ali was with a set of doctors and me and Phil. And he was training them on his methods of diagnosing. And his whole philosophy in integrated medicine was that if you get the diagnosis right, then you just have to address that which is off, because your body has its own resilience to be able to recover itself. So he used the tongue, the iris, the pulse as a way of diagnosing. And so the drummers would go out into the villages or into the forests and get, the gypsies or the indigenous populations to those villages and forests together. And the doctors, we would get trained by Dr. Ali, and I was very interested in this all the time, all along. So I was one of the people that was being trained, and we would all go into these villages and apply the diagnosing skills. And of course, Dr. Ali was there to verify. And then we had Ayurvedic practitioners who would then prescribe or provide various treatments if that was necessary. And at night, the king did the very kingly thing, which is he would create hunting parties. Not that we were going to hunt any animals, but the idea was that we would go out in jeeps and just really explore the animals that were there. And then right in the heart of the jungle somewhere, there would be the banquet of dinner set up for us. It was more like an adventure, not because we were going to hunt anything, but just it was called the hunting expedition, just the way it was organized. Now, Rajasthan is in the desert. It's the Western desert, right? And we were actually in an oasis part. However, there aren't street lights or anything like that there. So we were going out in these jeeps. It would be pitch dark, completely dark. And if you really wanted to see animals, you had to pause, stop the jeep, turn off the engine, turn off the lights, and then allow animals to show up out of curiosity and see and observe them. And I was like, what can you see? You can't even see the trees here. How can we see animals? They said, oh, wait, you will be able to see them. So what you saw was the animals would come out, and all you would see is like literally neon-like lights in their eyes. And they were different colors. Some of them, they were neon red, and then for others, it was neon amber. And for some, it was like blue. So for some, it was green. I'm like, this is phenomenal. It's like, and these people knew which animal had which color. The interesting thing was that the moment that would show up, those lights would show up in the eyes of these animals, we had a tiny, tiny, tiny light that was shining out from the vehicle, not the big headlight. So that it was there so that this light reflection would be in this color. It felt like the place was lit up. You could literally see where the path was. If you wanted to walk, we didn't walk, we stayed in the jeeps. So what I saw was this radiancy of inner light is a quality that applies to every living thing. That is what differentiates a living thing from an inanimate object. Because when I talk about vibrations, remember I talk about we are all vibrating. We are vibrational beings, including this glass has got molecules and atoms that are vibrating. Otherwise, you wouldn't see the form of the glass. Living beings have the radiancy. That is the difference between a glass and a living being. So this planet, with all of the living beings that exist, is rich and enriched with radiancy. Radiancy is one of the boosters of resilience. Even this knowingness of radiancy, even this wisdom of radiancy, really stations you in your resilience. Once you get that, how do you now work with it? The way you work with it is by really identifying how this radiancy has served you in some of the toughest situations that you may have gone through in your life. Some of the most challenging situations you may have experienced. How has this quality of being bright and sending out rays of light has played out? I know from my own experience that those times when I was in my first marriage and experiencing domestic violence, I could have completely been crushed. And it wasn't that I wasn't. The first few times was deeply crushing because this was a man that I had loved for 7.5 years and never realized that this could be the life that I would live. So there was deep sadness and grief was there. But when I did this body of work, remember, my lens wasn't focusing on the deep sadness that was there. It was like I only picked that moment because I do recall that experience of sadness. And I looked at where was radiancy showing up, because I clearly was resilient enough to be able to be here where I am right now. And I saw that I tapped into my radiancy at work. And I didn't actually look for it at home at the time, but it allowed me to feel radiant and show up in a very powerful way, really spreading this inner light in a country that was quite new to me, because I had gone to England. All of my training and education in what I was utilizing in England as a project leader was actually done in India, in computer sciences. And there I was leading a very different team, people from very different cultures. And it was that radiancy that allowed those disparate individuals to come together as a team. So whilst, yeah, sure, I had an MBA and I had done other forms of training as well as the usual graduate, postgraduate qualifications, nobody taught me about building a team, the team spirit or anything like that. I do believe it was this radiancy, the quality of connecting to my light, bringing that brightness. People often said, and even now when I've met some of them, they do talk about that there was a freshness with which I approached issues. And that was that inner radiancy. And that connected, what does light do? It lights the space up. It connects people to their own inner light. That's why it's a booster of resilience. Let's look at the second booster. We can spend the whole hour just on each one of these. The second booster is encouragement. Encouragement. Encouragement is an act of stimulating the development of an activity or a state or a belief. It's something that is inspiring. And it inspires in such a way that it inspires with courage. It inspires with spirit. And it's quite heartening, connects people to their heart. And stimulates people so that like stress releases. That is the fullness of what encouragement as a booster delivers. In the context of resilience, when you work with the encouragement booster, and I think we all did in our own ways during the COVID times where we just didn't know what was happening. Remember that time where we came together to tap on plates, to herald the medical workers. That was encouragement. That is exactly what we were doing. And not only did it give them encouragement, it also, and it stimulated and motivated them to continue being in action. It also boosted our own resilience to keep going, not knowing what's going to show up. And that was this encouragement utilized as a booster. So when you're doing lay of the land of where encouragement has showed up, how you have already utilized encouragement as a booster of your own resilience, look at where you have used it to inspire with courage, to inspire connecting to your own spirit. And that has got you to connect with the spirit of the moment. And that has encouraged something that has actually caused the result that you are now remembering. So when I look at my times, going into work, it actually was how other people reacted and responded to me. And then my memory of, okay, if I could do this, when I had this situation at home and I could show up at work and enable this shift to occur, that in itself encouraged me. It reconnected me to my own spirit. And I became inspired. In spirit, I got wired. So what it does here is when you apply the encouragement booster, you're actually looking at something that has taken some courage. It has brought you into a space of inspiration. And as a result, the combination of the two lands you connected to your spirit. And that is what has given rise to what you might call as success. And success has a very special quality where it continues to regenerate. So when you think about that, you anchor yourself as a master encourager of yourself and others. And it gets you to know that in any situation, you can tap into this booster. And once that resilience kicks in, it's like a springboard from which you literally can leap up to a whole new vantage that becomes available to you. What it did for me as I went into work, because it was still very early days of being in England, and seeing and experiencing that encouragement and then utilizing that encouragement as a way of encouraging myself, boosting my own resilience, it got me to completely leap up, like leapfrog, to a new vantage where I could see infinite possibilities for my career there in England. Not that I was going to change jobs or anything like that, but it just that knowing that anything and everything is possible here, should I choose to keep walking this path. So every time there was a deep down, dark moment that I would experience at home, the encouragement booster was the one that could get the volume turned up. And I remember my go-to book at that time was Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And it wasn't about the rich, the money part. It was more about think, and you can transform anything. And that was, I was using the encouragement booster. I didn't know it then. I wasn't doing it out of particular design. But when I look back to anchor every time we do the Pearl of Wisdoms, and then we're talking about the 7 ways or 7 boosters in this case, I always like to anchor it in real experience that you have already had. Because when you do this, you are reawakening a remembrance and honoring your own worthiness. And as a result, you reclaim your reconnection to dignity, which is something that you're born with. Let's look at the third booster. The third booster is salubrious. Salubrious is favorable to or promoting health or well-being. That is what salubrious dictionary definition means. So in the context of being a booster for resilience, just this incident that I talk about, going to work and being heralded as this high performer, it was absolutely favorable and promoted my own mental health. And emotional resilience was anchored. Well-being got rooted in me. And this quality of being an eternal optimist became very, very prevalent. And I became a glass half full person. Always. The salubrious as a booster, how do you use the salubrious booster strategy, is where you don't ignore anything. When I look at how I use it, I do combine it with the power tool of acknowledgement. Sometimes when something difficult occurs and it's really impacted you severely, the power tool of acknowledgement enables you to break the pattern of sliding down towards a train wreck. And you can then use it as the salubrious booster, boosting resilience, because it promotes internal health and well-being. And in many ways, there are so many of us that chose to change our lifestyle during the corona times. And our lifestyles, the change of lifestyle included change of diet, or even change of taking time to reconnect and reconnect. And I know people are talking about that, the world's going back to the way it was before. It actually isn't. I know the busyness has kicked in, and I certainly feel it when I'm flying around, how busy the airports are, how busy the flights are. When I go for it's summertime in Dubai. So where do you go for a walk to get your 10,000 steps? You go to the malls. And yes, sure enough, I see the malls are filled with many, many more people. But there is a sense of ownership that people have become awakened to their quality of life. I work with a whole business cohort in the Federation 100. And one of the things that they are noticing in their workforce is a very clear dialogue from people that they have employed or the employees that they already have, say, yes, we'll come into the office, but we want to have the flexibility to work from home, should we choose to. Workation has become an accepted word. Work and vacation combined. As a result, people are able to have greater duration of time out. And they're starting to integrate and harmonize work and living their life in the way they choose to. Even if everyone isn't doing it, the vast majority are engaging in that. And there is a knowingness in owners of businesses that, yeah, they just have to be open to flexibility. There's a very interesting phenomenon that I am seeing occur, especially with businesses, because Federation businesses do double trouble their turnover and earnings, and they start growing in a way that they had dreamt about, but not necessarily, they had envisioned, but not necessarily known how to do. So they do grow, they are growing. Despite the Corona times, most of them have grown quite substantially after they've returned. So one of the things I'm noticing is an openness to engaging people from different parts of the world, particularly in the technology industry, where it's quite challenging in India to find people because the job opportunities are massive. And some of the companies that some company owners I'm working with, when I went to speak at the UN recently, I connected to a whole cohort of very, very talented Ukrainian women in refugee camps that had exactly the skill set that I knew some of my organizations that I'm working with as a business mentor required. So it was like, okay, let's connect you to that refugee camp and see what can emerge from that. And one of them I had done last year, and she's a very flourishing CMO of a fast-growing organization still living out of Geneva, working for an Indian corporation, an opportunity that would not have been available to her previously, an opportunity that just wouldn't have been considered previously. But because of what we had already experienced, that came about. And why am I talking about this in the context of Salubrious? I'm talking about this in the context of Salubrious because there are these dialogues about how something can be really tough or something is just impossible, something just can't be done in a particular way, that create a sense of regret or create a sense of, resigning to a compromised way of operating, which actually depletes your health and well-being. There is a shift in actually anything is possible. And even when we hire people from our own country, we can't take anything for granted because somebody else might offer them a better job and they could go there. Whereas here we are getting some seriously talented people that are so excited and so grateful for having got that opportunity that recognizes what they've already achieved, that we are actually getting a much higher result. So we could do that. And that got enabled because companies have become, used to working online with people. Face-to-face meetings are no longer absolutely necessary to conclude deals. Just that knowingness itself boosts, promotes health or well-being. What is it doing to the refugees? It's promoting their health and well-being, knowing that they haven't lost it all. Their capabilities are being recognized. Now, I'm talking about this example because I'm very present to this. It's only last month that I was there in Geneva. So, reconnected with a few of these women that I had met last year. And there were many others that were talking about their own stories of what had occurred. But if you were to look back in your life, where has a salubrious booster showed up? You will certainly find many, many examples during the Corona times. Now, this is where I felt, okay, if I'm going to activate my own ability to make choices and actions that promote health or well-being. That knowingness that in the worst of situations, I have had access to this. And that's why I'm here, because this salubrious booster operates in this way, anchors resilience. Then a knowingness comes in, and resilience becomes a knowing. And health and well-being, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, environmentally, becomes my reality. Once that occurs, these three cylinders are firing well, my physical body reacts and responds in a way that I can be still within whilst dealing with very difficult situations. So I would very strongly recommend that each one of you go back and find at least one or two incidents from your life where you have utilized the salubrious booster. Simply acknowledging it allows it to regenerate itself. Let's look at the fourth booster. Fourth booster is incentive. Incentive is something that motivates you to do something, or motivates others to do something. And it's often used in the context of money. But it's not just that. You can offer, right now, certainly in the technology industry, you can offer as much money as you want. Certainly in the technology field, I'm seeing that people are not that motivated by money. They really are motivated by a sense of adventure, flexibility, the kind of people that they're going to interact with. I'm seeing this in the young adults population. We give them the label of millennials, but the young adults, but they're not necessarily motivated only by money. There are several that have actually done the journey into miracles, and as they've now graduated, like this last year or this year, as they've graduated, some of them have got jobs, others haven't, and they're still applying, and some have got offers that they are completely rejecting, much to shock and horror of their parents, particularly Indian parents. It's like, what's up with you? You've got this amazing job, and you're saying you don't want to do it, because when you talk to people that work there, they don't seem to be able to do anything outside of work, and you don't want to take that up. What's up with you? Do it for at least a year. So it's really important for us to recognize, yes, to make something come about, that motivation is really important. And just throwing something external at people, like money, doesn't necessarily motivate. It could be a fix solution, but it's not a motivating one that encourages them to make a choice that is the best for them. When you use incentive as a booster, for it to boost resilience, it is not about a quick fix solution. It really is about opening up your creative faculties and finding a creative, innovative resolution, a solution that's coming from resolve. It's so interesting. It's just, I've had such a cohort of these young adults that have started engaging with the kind of work that I'm bringing out into the world. And I guess I have taken on, developing 1 billion inspired leaders with the 7 habits of inspired leaders, focusing on young adults and women. So as a result, of course, the universe decides she likes that, and they are being magnetized towards me. So I'm very, very taken aback and curious at what their motivations are and how misunderstood they are. It's like in India, it has been all about academics. It's some amazing institutions that I have connected with where I go and talk about this. They used to be about academic grades, and even they are having to shift, offering more of a holistic experience, not just academic grades. So incentive as a booster, well, how do you work with it? For me, what I did was I really looked at what incentivizes me today. What incentivized me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And what I saw was every time I took action as a result of feeling motivated, self-motivated action, the incentivization had many, many facets to them. It wasn't only physical. It wasn't only a mental boost. It was a combination of things. Full spectrum incentivization is what you look for, to motivate yourself in such a way that your own motivation regenerates and it encourages you. Now, if you're to do this with yourself, that's exactly the way you will operate with others. As a human, the wholeness of your incentive motivators is what results in self-motivation. The fifth booster, I always land up rushing the last three because I've spent so much time in the first few. But doing so, it really gets you going. The fifth booster is legit. Legit, what's legit? Legit is it's truly, genuinely, extremely good. And you can talk about legal and all of that, but really what you're talking about is, it's truly, genuinely, extremely good. You feel it. It's authentic. There's integrity in it. It is legit. And you can apply legit to emotions. You can apply it to your mental state. You can apply it to physical agreements, actions. So as a booster, if I was to look at how I applied it as a booster to me in that situation where I'm being beaten up at home, going into work, and having a completely different experience. But what I was looking for, nobody at work knew what was going on. So if they were saying anything to me, they were not patronizing me, or they were not saying it to sympathize with me. They were not saying it to make me feel good. I looked for, was it legit? Was it truly, genuinely authentic response or feedback? And that is what made me feel extremely good. That is what motivated and encouraged me to keep going and doing better and better. So when you take for yourself, when you look back at a situation that might have been really tough, with the intention of anchoring each of these boosters as something that you yourself have used and applied, really look at where and how the legit booster showed up for you. If I was to look at, it was during this COVID times that I became far more engaged in delivering what I delivered online. And prior to that, right until the beginning of March 2020, I was traveling every month to London, to Los Angeles, to Dubai. Every month I was doing the Federation 100. And I know some of you are here who are members of that. And then I took it all online. And what I saw was that despite whatever was happening, including being one of the early ones to get COVID in that first sprint of COVID, I saw the authenticity with which I was showing up and others were. And we were sincerely sharing our vulnerabilities, our anxieties, and utilizing the tools of navigating the unknown. And that did make us feel extremely good. Because even though we may be talking about some pretty difficult situations, we were doing so not to gain sympathy or anything. We were really doing it as a sharing coming from a heart. And that was the impact it was having on everybody around. And it felt truly, genuinely, extremely good to be in this journey together. It did anchor a new belief in the goodness of humankind that enabled the innate vibration of being human, which is love, to amplify. Each one of you who've been part of this journey for all of these years have played your part in that way, because holographically, vibrationally, we are connected to so many more across the world. People that we may just have glanced passing by, but vibrationally, we started rising in our own vibrational frequency, connecting to our own inner light. And it started shining bright. And we started sharing it. And that is what reconnected humans to what really matters, to their core values. And love, being the innate vibration of being human, got anchored on this planet. That in itself opened the doorways for nature to reclaim itself, because nature was able to amplify with our humans returning to that innate vibration. Nature was able to amplify its own recovery and restorative process because it anchored itself in okayness. And we saw massive, massive changes occurring in nature. If it has occurred once, it is anchored in our own cellular memories, it can occur again just as easily. Very legit. And just the thought of that is truly, genuinely, extremely good. The ultimate feel-good factor is the legit booster. The sixth booster is empathetic. Empathetic is showing an ability to understand and share feelings of another person, putting ourselves in their shoes, and not being consumed by them, putting ourselves in their shoes, understanding where they're at. And then from that space, expressing our, by consciously choosing that which is ours to do. That is how the empathetic booster of resilience operates. It means, yes, you do wear your oxygen mask first, but you follow that very swiftly to sharing and supporting others to wear theirs. And there are several of you who I know are in the profession of supporting those that are in the last leg of their journey. An empathetic booster is the one that enables not only you to retain your resilience, it also supports those who you are supporting. So this one is a very straightforward lay of the land exercise, is what I would say to you to take on. Like literally look at the last 2 years, last 4 years, last 10 years, where the empathetic booster has played out. You will be surprised how often we have used this as a booster of resilience. This has been absolutely foundational for me as I have gone through my own spiritual awakening journeys. It gives me the strength to be able to step back and observe very keenly, very acutely, very minutely, knowing that I'm not going to get consumed by that which I'm observing, but I'm able to observe with such minutiae detail that I'm able to pick up the 1 or 2% of the nuance that requires my action or my attention. And I'm also able to discern where there is something that is mine to do. So when you work with the empathetic booster, this is where I use two very specific questions as an integral part of the strategy to utilize this booster of empathetic to boost resilience. And the first question is this mine to do? And then based on that response, that intuitive response, is where I take action. So use it for yourself. Yes, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Absolutely. And then ask, and when you do that, you're able to understand what is it that this person really requires. They may think that what they require is more money, or they may think what they require is another fix in terms of a drug or whatever. But actually, when you put yourself in their shoes and you're able to, in an empathetic way, look at what is it that this person really requires. What is that hidden hunger that is causing this person to ask for what their mind or what their thoughts are telling them? You can then choose to ask yourself the question, okay, I identified this. What is mine to do? And take that action. This next question to ask is, because it may be that you're engaged in providing a level of support that has now become expected of you. Ask yourself, if I didn't choose to, if I didn't have to, if I didn't need to, would I choose to take this action? If the answer is no, you don't take that action. Then you're going to engage with, so how am I going to be in communication with empathy? And communicate clearly. The seventh booster is curious. Curious is eager to know or learn something new, something unusual, something that is, it also like gives you that ability to investigate. You develop an inquisitive interest. And it can result in quite an exciting attention on something that you are curious about. And this whole resilience part, I became curious about it. I've read, my son's written like 4 different books, and they've got a business now of co-authoring books. And I learn a lot about what has been going on for him when I read his chapters. And one thing he talks about consistently is the quality that he's got from his mom is resilience. And that's how I became curious about it. And I knew it was one of the pearls of wisdom. And it really did bring in a very exciting attention on something of a topic like resilience. There's nothing exciting about it as such, However, by applying curiosity to anything you're giving attention to, it makes it exciting. It creates that inquisitiveness. It actually is the most powerful anti-aging booster. So with that having been said, I know we are up to time, and Catherine has gone on to her red carpet engagement. So I'm going to complete our session on resilience, use at least one of the boosters between now and the next time we meet. And it does not take very long. If you simply just allocate 10, 15 minutes a day, you will actually be able to go through all 7 of them. And it's phenomenal when you reawaken that understanding of your own ability, your own experience of having used each of these boosters. They can then start to regenerate. So thank you very much. Namaste. I will see you all next week at the same time. Thank you.